I'm going to start by telling you a story that starts last winter. Last winter, I had been in the business about 10 years, so it's coming up for, one of those milestones. Business was slow. It was winter. I'd hurt my back and I really couldn't stand. When you say you can't stand it, I really couldn't. And most of the people I trained were really busy. So we couldn't get this great buzz from getting all together because everybody had trained so that they could go do something and they were off doing it. So I was in this really quiet place. And I asked myself a question that maybe you've asked yourself from time to time. What am I doing? What am I doing? But here's something about NLP for those of you who are new. You learn in NLP that if you ask yourself a question, the appropriate thing to do is to answer it. And because I'm a writer, quite often when I have a question in my mind, I sit down and write a blog post. And the blog post that I wrote in response to what am I doing actually went back to the very first thing I had done when I came into NLP, which was try to look at all the jargon and the techniques and go, well, if I couldn't use any of those words, how would I describe this to people? What are the skills that people are actually taking away? What are we doing? And the blog post said, there are 4 things that keep me doing what I'm doing. There are 4 principles about people and choice and change that I believe in so strongly that I can't really imagine not doing something related to them. And all 4 of these principles could have come to me in other ways, but did come to me through my study of and practice of and teaching of NLP. The first one is one of my favorites. I say this about students, about stories. You're going to have a lot of favorites. One of my favorite principles of the way people operate in the world is that people are whole. They are one integrated system of mind and brain and body. And the more we do neuroscience and talk about the brain, the more we understand that our understanding of the brain leaves a lot of stuff out. So the brain, the mind, and the body, all one system. If you're part of any system, you know that changing any part of the system changes the whole system. And so your mother was right. Sitting up straight not only makes other people see you differently, it makes you see the world differently. Second principle comes to us mostly through the modeling of the work of Dr. Milton Erickson. Erickson is such a phenomenal healer and thinker that his work as a psychiatrist has actually spawned followers in a lot of different fields. Erickson dealt with really crazy people in the 50s, the 1950s, when our treatment for really crazy people was arguably a little more brutal than it is now. So it wasn't just nice or just self-help. And Erickson truly went to every single person with the belief that that person had within themselves what they needed to be more satisfied with their lives. So even the really craziest people, the people who were, by all accounts, both unhappy and detached from reality, have within themselves the resources, the strengths, skills, and capabilities, previous experiences, to pull up out of the back burner and make themselves more satisfied with their lives. Then everybody has it. You can't do NLP effectively if you don't believe that the people that you meet every day in your work, in your lives, in your communities, have within them the resources they need to live more satisfying lives. Third principle, well, you know, a poet said it several hundred years ago. His name was John Donne. He said, "No man is an island." He meant women too. The more we learn about the human brain, the more we know that human beings are creatures who, in NLP, we don't make presuppositions about your belief system, so we say, have evolved, we're designed. We ended up as creatures who are exquisitely well equipped to depend on the input from other people, other creatures like us. And we are more observant than we ever think we are of the people around us. They have a bigger impact on us. And what that means is we also have a bigger impact on them than we realize or understand consciously. So we just got so much to think about. But being with other people is an important part of every human life. And figuring out what that means and how to be together and be influenced and be influential. Principle number 3. Principle number 4 was that people do things on purpose. In my training of NLP, when I was trained, we used to talk a lot about intention. Part of the problem NLP has had over the years is that some of the times the people who evolved it and developed it had a tin ear. And they apparently didn't know what road is paved by good intentions. Intention does matter, but I don't love that word. Although I kind of like the tension in the middle of it. That spring, coiled and ready for motion. What people find most rewarding and hardest to accept when they begin to practice NLP or have it practiced on them or with them is that people don't make mistakes. They operate perfectly to get the result they're getting. And whatever you're doing, whatever state you are in, you are doing it. You are producing it. And you are doing it perfectly. What governs whether or not you're happy with that has a lot to do with how intentional you are. The good news is you have a choice. The bad news is you have to make a choice. We'll hear more about that this afternoon when you have to pick sessions. So purpose matters. I just read a very good book. It's not an NLP book, and it's the kind of book I read a lot. It's called The Skeptic's Guide to the Mind. I'm a big fan of skepticism. You work around the edges and you learn a lot. It's written by a medical doctor. And he's talking about the limits of what neuroscience can teach us, but he has a very interesting idea that the role of our consciousness, the mind that you know, the mind that you're aware of, is to tell the rest of your brain what to do. It presents a result, and the rest of your brain looks around the world for whatever inputs will help you reach that. So you may have thought I would talk about goals or outcomes, but today I'm going to talk about purpose. That was the end of the blog post, and I left something out. I left something out the way everybody else leaves it out. It's really funny. It's especially funny for a storyteller to leave out the idea that all of human thought and behavior occurs in patterns. Because the kind of pattern that we use automatically, everybody, from the time they're this high, Carolina tells beautiful, crazy, complicated stories. And every story is a pattern. And as you find the patterns in your own life, the patterns in other people's lives and behaviors, you have an opportunity either to slide in and support that pattern, or to change something, to be disruptive. I hope some of you are at least a little disruptive. So there you have it, 5 principles of change. And I thought for a long time, well, for several months anyway, I couldn't come up with any others that I needed. I couldn't come up with any work I needed to do, either to change myself or to influence other people, to sell, to manage, to coach, or to train, that I couldn't use those 5 principles, find techniques that fit with them, and get a result. And the result I really wanted, first and foremost, was twofold. One, it had taken me 10 years to write my first book. I decided to write my next book in 4 months. Didn't decide it would be quite enough long, it took 8. But I wrote a book on the 5 principles, so that's going to be available this winter. You can come back and cheer with me. But what I was really curious about is this idea of purpose, because purpose is so important. Goals are so important. When I came into NLP, we came in with this idea of well-formed outcomes. And I was taught, you can still find lots of places that will teach you, that a well-formed outcome is something you want, that you can imagine in your senses what you will see, hear, and feel as you experience having this thing that you want. That it is within your control. And in NLP they say that it's ecological, which just means it's worth the price you're going to pay to get it. And there's nothing at all wrong with that. That's absolutely true. It just seems to me a little limited. Because if you only ever do things within your control, how do you grow? And how do you play with other people? Because other people are very seldom within our control. Really ever. Those of you who are new parents in the room have already figured that out. So purpose. How can you know your purpose if it's hard just to define a goal? And purpose, as I was writing the book, became the most important element because it was that thing that we can only intuit exists. So you can't do an operation and find it. They're not going to find the part of your brain that is purpose. You can't usually say it in one line. You know, it's not a slogan, it's not a motto. And yet, we know when we've done something on purpose, it's one of the first things we check out. When you're 4 years old, you know that doing it on purpose makes all the difference. Because if you did it on accident, you can be forgiven. But if you did it on purpose, you're in trouble. So deep in our memories is a memory of knowing what it is to be on purpose. And what NLP has done through all of these principles, all of these experiences, is showing me and a lot of the people I work with that some things we know in ways that are too complicated for words, too complicated for our core conscious minds, which are always struggling to catch up with all the different things our magnificent brains and bodies are doing. And yet our mind has a role in that. And so I'm going to ask you now to put down your pens and sit comfortably. I'm going to use my notes and then you'll have exactly the same experience when you look at it later. Because this exercise is printed on one of your cards. Do an NLP exercise, you have to let your body be quiet for a moment. And let your mind start to focus. And all you have to do is notice what you're noticing. That it's a little weird. The temperature in the room. If your eyes are open or closed, you'll notice the light. And as you do, I want you to think of a time you did something on purpose. A time you did something and you knew it was the right thing to do. And it doesn't have to be, I changed the world that day. It could be, no, I really needed to shut the door and have a bath. Mothers try that a lot. As far as I can tell, the phone still rings. So pick a time you did something on purpose, and it can be a little thing or a big thing, but you're just sure that that thing was the thing you did on purpose. And now look around and start to recreate that memory of that thing you were doing as if it was happening now. And in your mind, and in your mind's eye, see what you were seeing as you did that thing on purpose. Hear what you were hearing as you did that thing on purpose. And feel throughout your body the physical sensations that are part of that experience of doing that thing on purpose. Now notice, where are you? When are you? Literally, what time of year, what time of day, what's around you in the environment. And notice you did something. What did you do? What behaviors were part of this thing you did on purpose? If you picked a more complicated thing, there might be a lot of different behaviors you had to do this thing. And as your mind is wandering around those things you did, you can become aware that you have strengths, skills, and capabilities that allowed you to do those behaviors so that you could do this thing on purpose. Now think about just one person who knew you did this thing that you did on purpose that was the right thing. And think about how would that person describe what you did? What did they notice about you doing this thing? That there's a whole group of people who are aware of you having done this thing or were impacted by it. How would they talk about it among themselves? This thing that you did. And finally, as you let your mind hold this thing you did, the sights, the sounds, the feelings, the behaviors, the strengths and skills that allowed you to do those behaviors, the input from other people on what you did. Become aware of the beliefs that you hold about yourself and the beliefs you hold about the world that allowed you to do this one thing on purpose. And when you have all the information that it will be useful for you to have about that experience, just take a deep breath and come back to the room and notice what it feels like to do something on purpose. And you can wonder, is it just a trick of language? I mean, we say we do things on purpose, but is it really on purpose? And yet there is a part of us that knows when we are doing the right thing, and a part of us that knows quite often when we are doing what we would like to be the right thing. There is the part of us that knows what it would be convenient to have as our purpose, but that's not our purpose. And the part of us that knows what it means to be true to ourselves, which means to be true to our purpose. And it seems to me that if we are unwilling to think about our purpose because it's difficult to think about, then we're also unwilling to know, how do I make choices? And how do I know if a choice is a good choice? Because purpose is like the biggest box. It's the box that all the good choices fit into. And I'm afraid if a choice doesn't fit into that box, it's unlikely to be sustainable. So people can do things that aren't part of their purpose. We've all done things that aren't part of our purpose. We have all been with that person, taken that job, said those words, and went, oh, why did I do that? And sometimes the answer is just that we haven't taken time, not to define or analyze, not even to give words to, but to sit with the idea. We actually know somewhere, not in our brains or our bodies or our mind, but somewhere in the pattern formed by all three in that wholeness, that we have a purpose, that there's something we're trying to do with our lives. We know when we're getting closer and when we're getting farther away. But we only know it with our peripheral vision. When we get to techniques of NLP, which we're not really going to do a lot of today, just a little bit, you've already had a little experience, some of the details become really curiously useful. Like the importance of your peripheral vision. So we're used to thinking about focus. There are even trends. I imagine we're on a big one now because Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence, has just written a new book called Focus. And so it's all about focus. But you know, there are things you can't see when you're focused. There are things that your peripheral vision, which is never quite in focus, does better than your focused vision. And one of those things is to capture movement. This is why often you will catch out of the corner of your eye an expression on somebody's face. And although you don't even know what that expression was, you start to respond to it. You start to change your sentence in mid-sentence. Because something tells you, and you kind of go, I don't know, I just knew it was just a feeling. But a lot of times, part of that feeling was something you caught with your peripheral vision, because it catches things that are quick, and it catches things that change. And why this matters to purpose is purpose is something we catch in our peripheral vision. It's something we know because we're moving. We do something, and we either do it on purpose or by accident. Those categories really don't change very much as we get older. But you have to do something. And notice it's a bit of a catch. Because if you're only going to really know you did it on purpose when you've done it, then you don't get to know beforehand all the time. Somewhere, somebody set the system up to have a little fun in it. A little guesswork. How do you change the odds? You be aware. You practice being on purpose. You practice noticing that sometimes you did something and it felt really right. Now I know that evolution is really worried that we are in physical danger at every moment of our lives. And because evolution is really worried that we are in physical danger at every moment, it makes us very good at picking up all the things that scare us, just in case they're dangerous. And then all the things that are moving, because things that are moving could be dangerous. And so maybe we should be scared of them. You get an override button. Override button is your conscious intention to notice what you value, to notice when you are on purpose, to notice what it feels like when things are right. But it is an override. It's not your default. And even if you think you are a very happy person, you are still subject to the same rules of evolution that have governed everybody else in the room. And it's still easy to notice what you don't like. It's still easy to notice what's not working. And it's still easy to think that movement might be dangerous. So the best time to take movement is after you have connected in some wonderful way with an experience of being on purpose. Because then for just a little while you get sort of a halo effect and you get brave. And because you know you have a purpose and you know what it's like to be on purpose, you actually do stuff. You get moving, you get busy, and then you get to check in. Yeah, I said check in. I know, it ruins the flow, huh? It's like, no, now I sail off. No. There's a sailor in the room. I think she'd tell you sailing is actually hard work. Even when you sail off into the sunset, you're actually doing a lot of checking. You're doing a lot of navigating, a lot of course correction. But it starts with having somewhere to go. And your purpose doesn't always tell you where the end is, but it sure tells you what the right direction is. So I'm going to leave you there.